Hey everyone, it is September 9th, and we are here with a very special podcast. As we know, we are hot in election season at this point. And we have a lot of different things not only going on in the state of Georgia, but going on around the country. And we're going to talk about and focus on the great state of Florida coming up next, right after this next video. Join me for the collective discussion with Miss Patricia Fleurinord from Florida Rising, talking about things that are going on in Florida in this election season. Y'all, people are dying because they're waiting on us. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Hey everyone, so we are back. We have a special guest on with us today. Sorry, we have a few things we're trying to do behind my head here, but we have a special guest on. We have Patricia Fleurinord, who's representing today a group called Florida Rising out of the great state of Florida. And we've been talking about recently, I guess the great governor of Florida has passed a bill, is it? Where he created an election integrity police department. Is that what it is? Explain that more to me first before I stick my foot in my mouth.
Okay. Hi, Patricia Fleurinord from Florida Rising. And yes, Sean, he has hired a special police force to actually, I think, as a scare tactic to returning citizens who actually received their voting rights through the Amendment 4 in 2020. So, yes, he has hired a special police force for that. Yes.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I found it interesting. I was reading a report that I think you sent over to us here the other day and had somebody research it. That there were one, two, three, four, five, six people arrested in Hillsborough County, three people arrested in Orange County, which, if you don't know where Hillsborough is, we're talking about Tampa, Orlando area. Palm Beach, there was three people arrested and three people arrested in Broward County, and two arrested in Miami-Dade County for what they call unqualified. So what is the state of Florida trying to say? Why are these people? Why were they not qualified to be allowed to vote?
Well, Sean, one of the things that was an issue, and I spoke with FRRC because 2 weekends ago they had a convening in for their 10 years anniversary in Orlando, Florida. But one of the things that happened is when people received their rights back through Amendment 4, there were some great overlooks because if you have any crimes against children or murder or violent crimes, you are ineligible to vote. So what happened was them not realizing that they filled out voter registration cards, and the supervisor of elections actually sent them out a voting card. So when they received their voting cards, they were under the impression that they can vote. The supervisor of election office, I was told, has not updated their system uh, to research people who registered through Amendment 4. So they did receive a card. They felt like they were eligible to vote, and they really wasn't.
And just
So
for people who don't understand what Amendment 4 is, in 2020, just for clarification, it was unconstitutional to be able to your. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Your rights to vote was not automatically restored after you served your time in the state of Florida. And from what I understand, the state of Florida decided that they brought a ballot initiative to the ballot where they kind of really defined it. They made it real plain that once a person has served their time, their rights should be restored to be able to vote. And from what I understand, the governor at that point in time called special legislation to kind of define or explain that more in detail of what Amendment 4, what he didn't feel like was answered in Amendment 4 on the ballot, on the voting ballot. He defined it more. And this is where he got into some of those things about, I think ex offenders on certain crimes cannot get their rights automatically restored. Is that correct?
yes, and also I forgot to mention Also, what Amendment 4 also did, well, FRRC also did, is that people who were not eligible to vote because of fines and fees, they were supposed to cover their fines and fees. Now, at the convening, I found out that if a person had $10,000 in fines and fees, but you had 10 more people who fines and fees were 1,000 or less, they're going to cover those 10 people versus that 10,000. And because they felt like uh, it was better to help more than to just not be able to help those with less of fines and cover the one with 10,000. So that's a scenario that they gave. Well, even on the fines and fees, Sean, a lot of people went through FRRC and they thought their fines and fees were covered, and they weren't. So we're also, we're looking into all of that. The guys that was arrested, FRRC is going to be representing those guys and getting them legal representation as well. Because
So,
the burden falls on the supervisor of election office. Those guys never should have been issued a voter's card.
so one of the things that I find interesting when we talk about, like, even in the state of Georgia, we now have this question that's been asked, is whether or not a person who has served time is eligible to be able to vote, right?
Hmm.
it, shouldn't there could there not just be a database that these supervisor elections officers have where they can just type a person's name in and see if they're qualified or eligible to vote? And is that something the state of Florida is even looking at right now? Just creating a database to be able to put people who are impacted by the criminal justice system or who have had to go through the criminal justice system to actually be able to just to find out? Because like in Georgia, right, it's confusing because SB 202, which is our replication of Amendment 4, it literally states that if a person who's served their time has the right to have their rights restored, which has always been law in Georgia. But what it says is that they have to then reach out to the probation officer or parole officer to find out. Well, you and I both know if you're not on probation or parole anymore, your probation or parole officer don't care to keep up with what you have going on in your life enough to be able to keep up whether you're ready to vote or not. So is there not like a system that we can put in place from like a state perspective, from Florida, Georgia, looking at things like that, where people can just type in a name and just find out if a person's eligible or completed their sentence?
Yeah, so we're one of the things we are going to be going to, not necessarily going after the supervisor of election office, but we want them to be able to notice that before. So one of the instructions that I received from FRRC, because I really want to do a big push for returning citizens to go out and vote, because when we went out in 2020, it was strong, and those elections I really feel was won because of Amendment 4. And so we are going to, one of the things that now we are having to do is when we're talking to someone who's a returning citizen, first of all, find out what their crimes were to make sure it wasn't a sex crime or a murder or things like that. We're going to find out. Also, if they're in doubt about it, we're not necessarily going to try to get those people to register and take them to the polls. We don't want to risk them, because now what that was, DeSantis was clearly a scare tactic, so now he has returning citizens afraid because they don't want to go to jail. So we're going to tell them if they're in doubt and we can't get the answers to whether they have their rights has been restored, then what we're going to do is say, hey, look, you may not be able to vote, but in your place, how about taking 10 of your family and friends to vote? So we're going to still ask them to be involved in helping us getting other people out to vote who can vote.
And I'm glad you used the word scare tactic because we've been seeing it across the nation recently. A lot of governors have been using scare tactics and different rules and regulations and passing different laws to prevent certain people from turning out to vote. How have you guys seen that in Florida? Like, what have been some of the scare tactics that you guys have seen besides, arresting people who thought they were eligible to vote based upon every indication, and then they found out that they were not registered to vote? And should a person be arrested for using their fundamental right to have a voice in this society?
Well, of course, like we feel like they should be. I feel like once you serve your time, and especially for the ones who have been out of prison 10, 20 years and they're positive role models in the community, why can't they vote? So we're going to be still trying to push that. Legislation session is coming up, and right now at Florida Rising, we're trying to decide the laws that we're going to be taking up to Tallahassee. And one of them is we're trying to see whether it's going to be around clemency, whether it's going to be around over sentencing, whether it's going to be around, you know, treatment versus handcuffs, because a lot of times too, a lot of people, and this takes me into one of the cases that we're working on is a young lady by the name of Alethea Jones. Alethea was clearly a drug addict. She rolled in the car one day with her sister, and she had her crack still in her breast and her crack in her breast clearly states she's an addict. Okay, she rode with her sister, and her sister ended up selling to an undercover police officer. Alethea didn't sell it; her sister sold it. I think her sister pleaded out and got like 6 or 8 years, but Alethea didn't plead out because she felt like, I didn't do anything. I didn't sell the crack to the undercover police. I was just in the car. And again, in the car because added thinking that she can, her sister would give her something later to get high with. But anyway, because she didn't plead out, Sean, they gave her life plus 30 years. She's already served 20 years already in Lower Correctional Institute, and she has a handicap. She has one leg. She's in a wheelchair, and all she's asking for is to be able to come home and spend the rest of her time with her grandchildren and her son. And so um we're definitely going to be pushing for her right now. We're getting petition signed. Sean, I will make sure you get the link, or if you pull up Alethea Jones, it'll give you a link to sign a petition. We're trying to get Alethea out. And one of the things we're having to do is try to get her back in front of a judge. Because if that crime had happened today, she wouldn't have got life. And we're pulling up also cases where the same crime was committed by a white person, and they literally got almost like a slap on the wrist. So we're pulling up those kind of cases to show to the courts that, like, when it comes to black and brown folks, like, we're treated so unfairly. We're not treated the same as our counterparts, and that's with anything, as you know. So yes, we're working on a lot of those things. You're going to be seeing a lot of that stuff happening around election season.
So ending on this, and one of the things that I think is crucial is that, believe it or not, in the state of Georgia recently, they've actually, and I know you guys have been doing some work around this too, that a lot of people don't even understand that because you're charged with a crime does not mean you automatically lose your right to vote.
Right.
Just being charged with a crime does not mean that you don't have the right to vote. And I know we're doing here is that a lot of the different organizations are actually going into the jail right now and registering people to vote while they're incarcerated.
Right.
Are they doing some of those things in Florida right now?
I've heard, like, Sean, when one of the greatest experiences I had with working in elections is when Barack Obama ran for the first term. I was able to go into the jails because I was already teaching in jails, and I was like, "Hey, these people are waiting to be sentenced. All of them haven't lost their right to vote." So I got a list of names of the guys who wanted to vote, and wasn't sure whether or not they could. I gave it to the supervisor of election office, Brenda Snipes at the time, and she ran their names and she told me the ones who were eligible to vote. Then I had to have them sign a letter giving me the permission to pick up their absentee ballots from the supervisor of election office. I took it into the jail, and those guys were able to, to vote. And I was able to drop it back off to the supervisor election office. Shortly after, before he was when he was the second round, they shortly after that they came back and said that it was illegal to do that. So um, and at the same time with myself, I was able to vote for up until I voted all these years. But when Barack Obama ran for the second term, is when I got a letter from from the supervisor of election office saying that I was ineligible to vote, and my rights had not been restored. And through Amendment 4, I was able to get cleared again, and I was able to vote in 2020. So, saying all that to say is that um, we just got to be more strategic, until we can get some stuff passed around Amendment 4, because what we're needing to do, like a lot of other things, is revisit that and make them keep their commitment.
So, if you have any one message for people out there who think voting is not important, why is it important that we get out to vote, we register to vote, and we turn out our whole families to vote? Why is it important?
Because Sean, one of the things I had this lady tell me one day. She said to me, she's a state rep. And she said to me, she said, Patricia, if you think about it, when you're in the community and people are like, they don't want to vote because of this, that, and that, first of all, for me, I vote because I want to have a voice. And our ancestors, Sean, how they fought, they got beaten, they got uh hosed, all type of stuff to keep them from getting to the poll. Because our counterparts knew, white folks knew that when we stand up for ourselves, that we were going to have a strong presence. So the one and only time that anybody ever asks you your opinion is election time. You think about it. When it's not election time, they're not coming to your door asking you what do you think, who you think should represent. Election time is the only time that they even care about what you think and what you have going on. So you must take that opportunity to have a voice. Okay, I know a lot of times we say, "Well, I went out and voted, and it seemed like nothing didn't happen." But guess what? Remember this: the Republicans, white people, don't want you to vote. So you're not hurting them at all by not going to the poll, because they really don't want to hear. They really don't want you to have a voice. Okay. But this is an opportunity where you do have a voice. So you got to get out and vote. You have to take your family members to vote. And another thing is your local elections, your primaries are the most important election.
Absolutely.
Why I say that? Because that's the one that directly affects you. Your judges, your commissioners, your state reps. Those are the ones that directly affect you. So you know what? Show up to your primary. Show up to vote anytime there is an election. Stand up and have a voice. And stop having voices on the street corner with people who can't change anything. Have a voice to the people who can make changes.
Absolutely. And I would just I encourage everybody, if you have not yet, I mean, if you're in the state of Georgia, you can go to sos.ga.gov to find out our election dates and when you are able to register to vote. The last day to register to vote, I know in the state of Georgia, is October 11th. It's the last day to register. And in the state of Florida, if you are concerned that you don't know how to get information about the state of Florida, you can go to, I think it's sos.fl.us, which is
Yes,
the Secretary of State's website, and you can look up the voting dates as well in the state of Florida. We have to get out and register to vote. If you have family members in your family who are not registered to vote, tell them, listen, I seen a shirt last night and I wanted to buy it. They said it says that if you want to date me, you have to be registered to vote first. And I was like, okay, we have to start, we have to start making it just that important, because as you stated, Miss Patricia, it's like literally people have fought and died for us to have the right to be able to get out and go and cast a vote. And in a democracy, importantly in a democracy, sometimes the only voice we do have is at the ballot box. So thank you for your time. Thank you for the work that you guys are doing down there at Florida Rising. We'll continue to share this podcast. It'll go out today and we promote it throughout the whole state of Florida. And we'll definitely make sure you get information. And we'll also put in there information about the some of these cases that we've seen, as well as the case that you mentioned earlier today, but you wanted us to kind of promote, and that's going to be the case of, and I'm trying to make sure I get her name right. I tested to you,
Alethea Jones.
Alethea Jones. We'll put the link in there as well for people to go and sign that petition, because at the same time, justice has to be fair and justice has to be equal. And we have to make sure that those of us who have a voice in that space, make sure that we protect that. For those who are staying with us, I want you guys to remember that we'll be back tomorrow here at First Iconia. We'll be hosting our gun violence roundtable, where we'll have people from around the spectrum talking about gun violence, especially with everything that's going on. We do want to just mention too, as an organization, Black Push, we do stand in solidarity, not only with families who've been impacted by gun violence, but even law enforcement when they're impacted. And we know in the state of Georgia recently, last night, we had two deputy sheriff's officers killed in Cobb County while serving a FTA warrant. So we want to keep them and their families in Cobb County Sheriff's Department in our prayers, because gun violence on any level is a tragedy. And thank you again, Mrs. Pat, for coming on today and talking to us about these important issues. And please, if you are watching, please register to vote. Make sure you go check out your state Secretary of State's website and find out more information, and pay attention to what's going on in your state legislator and what bills they're passing. Because people who were given access to voting and told they had the right to vote should not be penalized or charged with felonies because they used that voice and they exercised their right to vote just because they didn't vote for one political party or another. That's not the system in which we stand and support. And thank you again for coming on with us today. I know
Okay.
you're busy.
And also, let me just leave my email for anyone who, if you want to get in contact with me, if you're in the state of Florida, have family in the state of Florida, and any returning citizen, family, or friends that's in the state of Florida, you can reach out to me. My email address is Patricia, that's Patricia, at floridarising.org. And
Absolutely.
thank you, Sean. I really appreciate you having me on today.
And we'll definitely put your email address in this as well, Ali, and we'll also include a link to Florida Rising's website as well.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you so much. And you guys,
All
please stay
right.
tuned for everything. Next week, we start a special podcast series talking about the different state elected offices in the state of Georgia. We'll have professors on, we'll have different elected officials on talking about why it's so important that we got to vote up and down the ballot, from the governor's race all the way down to the Department of Education. We have to get out and vote. We have to vote for our local mayors, our local judges, our local elected officials, because we need to know who we have in office.